Taking refuge, generating bodhicitta, once in English, twice in the Tibetan chant. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the positive potential I create by listening to teachings and the other paramitas, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye chadang soki chognam la, jangchu bardu dagni kiapsu chi, dagi jinso gibe sonam ki, rola penchir sangye druparsho. Sangye chadang soki chognam la, jangchu bardu dagni kyapsu chi, dagi jinso gipe sonam ki, rola penchir sangye druparsho. Now imagine that you are completely surrounded by all sentient beings throughout the universe. And in reality, actually, we are. If you think about it, wherever you are, there are sentient beings all around you. So you can just think this is for real. Even if it's not humans, you've got insects and animals and birds and all kinds of things.
Within a mile of everything.
Yeah, but some people might be out in the middle of the jungle and they're watching this, right?
Still, relatively speaking, in terms of the entire universe, they're close.
They are close. So, one of they have us imagine that we're surrounded by all sentient beings, but in truth we are. So as we go to this next prayer, which is the four immeasurables, imagine that you are surrounded by all sentient beings, and in reality you are. And these four immeasurables, it's immeasurable love, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable joy, and immeasurable equanimity. And they are what the Buddha Chenrezig, the Buddha of compassion, embodies these qualities. So we can imagine also that the Buddha Chenrezig is with us and is emanating these qualities as we think about all sentient beings with this particular prayer. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And may we be inspired and blessed by our spiritual teachers and all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to have the motivation, the enthusiasm, and the power to accomplish this. If we think about the world, we can see that this is really truly needed, and the place to start is with ourselves. Now I want to go into the Manjushri mantra, because now that we're in the section that's really starting to talk about emptiness and the nature of reality, our teachers always suggested whenever we're doing that, we need to do the Manjushri mantra. And Manjushri is the embodiment of wisdom, the kind of wisdom that cuts through our ignorant, self-grasping view, which is a deluded view, which sees the duality. We see a duality between subject and object, and conventional reality and ultimate reality. And Manjushri, the studying of the wisdom teachings that Manjushri embodies, help us to sort of collapse that duality. And that's what we are aiming to do when we go for a realization of emptiness. So I wanted to again go over very briefly the mantra itself, which is Om. It's Om, A, Ra, Pa, Sa, Na, Di. And these syllables stand for things. So Om is they say it's the essential sound of beginningless nature, of the beginningless nature of the universe. And if the universe, if reality is so, then everything in the universe is going to have some part that reflects the nature of reality. And in our case, the way they talk about Om, especially in Hinduism, is they talk about using the breath with Om. And if we think of the way we breathe, there is an expansion. We take in the air. There's an expansion, then there's a contraction, and then there is, you go to all of the air is out. And there's a moment where there is, nothing, and then it expands again. So the way scientists have talked about the universe itself is they talk about the Big Bang theory. And the Big Bang is that there is this very intense contraction where nothing is occurring. All matter and energy of all kinds are sort of contracted into this very small, they even say it's like the size of an orange, and it's extremely, unbelievably hot. And then it explodes, it expands, and then that expansion just keeps going out, like we fill up with air, and then it begins to contract. And this is the way universes, Hindus talk about this, Buddhists talk about this. The universe expands and contracts. And then there's that moment, there's the period where there's this moment between the expansion and contraction, and then it comes again. And we'll see that's the same with our breath. The way we take in the energy that keeps us alive. When our breath stops, when the breath goes, we're gone. So you use Om, and you use it with your breath, and you think of that expansion, and you breathe in, kind of an ah, you breathe out with a ooh, and then as you close the you sort of are bringing it up from your crown chakra, throat chakra to your, your heart chakra to your throat chakra to your crown chakra. And it's a way of seeing how we are part of the universe too. The whole expansion and contraction of the universe is we embody it ourselves. So that's Om. Then the other syllables, a, ra, pa, sa, na, di, they all stand for something. They stand for longer Sanskrit words, but basically is signifying that the empty, independently arising nature, the empty, dependently arising nature of self and phenomena is beginningless and uncreated. So there's no, as we've talked about before, there is no, according to Buddhism, there is no first cause. There has to be, if there was a first cause, then you'd have to go, well, that first cause has to be beginningless, otherwise it was caused by something else. We talked extensively about this, and I'm fully now on board with beginningless time because it makes sense to me. So the is the empty nature of self and phenomena is beginningless and uncreated. The next syllable, ra, is the empty nature of self and phenomena is uncorrupted and stainless. So what does that mean, uncorrupted and stainless? It's talking about this process, the process of dependent arising itself. The in, the out, and all of the causes and conditions for the in and the out, and the in and the out, is the process itself is not corrupted. The process itself is stainless. It just always is the way it is. We ourselves corrupt it and make it, create these stains based on our ignorance of the way we actually exist, and we try to hold on to that in and out, constant movement of dependent arising. We kind of grasp and hold on to it and say, this is independently self-existent, and I'm keeping hold of it. And this causes all of our problems, all of our attachment, all of our anger, all of the negative karma that we generate is because we are frustrated that we actually can't hold on. We can't hold on to ourselves. We can't hold on to our relationships. We can't hold on to anything. We have to have this idea of everything is a dependent arising. So the process itself of dependent arising is stainless and it's uncorrupted. It just is. It's the way it is. The next syllable is pa, and that signifies that the empty nature of self and phenomena is the ultimate truth. It is the ultimate reality. The empty nature of self and phenomena is the ultimate reality. Everything dependently arises, and it's constantly doing that moment to moment to moment to moment. Never a stop of this dependent arising. The next syllable, sa, is signifying that the empty nature of self and phenomena does not die, and it is not reborn. So this whole process that we think of as of death, and where, some of us may think that's it, lights out, it's all over. In reality, that's not the case. Nothing ever dies. This dependently arising process, which is empty of any kind of independent self-existence, never stops. So it never dies, and it's never reborn. It's constantly going through the whole process of death, bardo, rebirth, death, bardo, rebirth. The syllable na, the next one, signifies that the names that are given, the names that we give to self and phenomena, are nothing more than labels. That's all they are, is names. And that the empty, dependently arising nature behind those names and labels cannot be gained and it can't be lost. It's just always there. Again, this empty, dependently arising nature is always there. This is important because this is what we are going to be talking about for a long time now. So I want us to sort of understand this mantra. And then the final syllable, D, is a way that what we should think is that we are awakening our awareness of that dependently arising empty nature within us. And we're realizing, this is always going constantly within me, within my being. It's constantly, I myself am empty of any kind of independent self-existent nature, which is wonderful news because it means we can change. We can transform. If there's something we don't like about the way we are, we can change it. And we can change it by creating the causes and conditions for it. And that's the idea of this D. When we're saying that, we're realizing, we actually have the power within us to change and transform into something that we really would like to be, and that the world that we would like to see. We can contribute to that. So this is the mantra. I know that there's no way that even I will remember everything I just said, but I'm going to keep saying it so that we become familiar with the idea of what this mantra is talking about, and that it's not just a bunch of syllables that we're saying that have no meaning. So we'll do this, a few times. Om Apprehend. And at the final, the conclusion of the last repetition of the mantra, when we say D, we'll repeat it over and over a few times as a reminder that we ourselves can awaken that, we can become awakened to that dependently arising empty nature of who we are, and which is wonderful because it means we can transform. Okay, so here we go. Om Arapatanadi, Om Arapatanadi, Om Arapatanadi, Om Arapatanadi, Om Arapatanadi. Om Arapatanadi, 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 Om Arapatanadi. Om Arapatanadi, Om Arapatanadi, Om Arapatanadi, Om Arapatanadi, Om Arapatanadi, Om Arapatanadi, Om Arapatanadi. Om Arapatanadi, Om Arapatanadi, Om Arapatanadi, Om Arapatanadi. So I think one of the things to remember about all of this, what Manjushri is representing in the emptiness, the wisdom aspect of the Buddhist path is that this empty, dependently arising nature is a process that never, ever, ever stops. And so we just have to find the way to work with it that is going to be positive and beneficial, not only for ourselves, but for all beings. All right, now we're going to recite the 7-limb prayer. For those of you who, and I hope some of you are doing the practice, the 7-limb practice, which is in the, I made an audio of transforming our karma. It's called Transforming Our Karma. And that's a guided meditation that takes you through the entire 7-limb practice. And the point of that practice, which our teachers stressed from the very beginning, is to generate positive potential within ourselves. And then sort of the heart of that practice is purifying our negative karma. So there's a whole purification process that happens in this 7-limb practice, which is extremely beneficial if we do it on a daily basis, because we begin to generate the habit of changing the direction of how we behave, how we speak, and how we think. But we have to do it. If we don't practice that, it's not going to happen. So I highly suggest that we all do this 7-limb practice. There is like I said, a guided meditation. There's always, I have it in print as well. And our teachers always said, you will never have a realization of emptiness if you don't clean up your afflictive emotions first, or at least be working on it. So we have to be working on it. And why is that? Is because our mind will be too distracted and too disturbed to even be able to focus and concentrate on what we need to focus and concentrate on in order to have a realization of the nature of reality. So the 7-limb practice and the what it represents are an essential first step that we really must be taking if we are serious about the Bodhisattva path. So here it is. We'll just recite it. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind, and present clouds of every type of offering, actual and mentally transformed. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merits of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until samsara ends, and turn the wheel of dharma for sentient beings. I dedicate the merit created by myself and others to the great enlightenment. And finally, we'll close our opening prayers with a mandala offering. And Kavita, who was it? Oh, Steve Collier, Reverend Steve Collier. Steve Collier is a Western. I think he maybe is from England. He's a Western Buddhist monk. He speaks Tibetan fluently, and he is the one who the text that we're using for Nagarjuna's Precious Garland was translated by Steve Collier from Kensor Rinpoche's teachings. So Steve Collier has a way of doing this mandala offering, which I think is wonderful.
Way of thinking.
Way of thinking about it. So there's a little hand configuration that we do, a mudra that we do when we're saying this mantra. And usually they say, you think of Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon, and it doesn't have a heck of a lot of meaning to us Westerners. So normally I've said, just imagine a universal system in which all consciousnesses and forms are functioning in a wholesome, interdependent manner. Well, and then you picture it, then they say, picture a mandala and it goes into the heart of the Buddha. Well, Steve Collier says, picture in your hands that you've got in this position, that you are holding all sentient beings. You are holding all sentient beings throughout the entire universe and the universe of universes within your hands. And you are making this offering to the Buddhas and all the Bodhisattvas that you intend to work on behalf of all sentient beings, to bring about this universal system, to be part of bringing about this universal system in which all consciousness and form is functioning together in a perfectly balanced, wholesome, interdependent way. So imagine that you're holding all sentient beings within your hands as we recite this mandala.
The point he made was that you're envisioning it as purified.
Yeah, and you're envisioning it as purified. All the sentient beings are purified.
You didn't quite
Part
say
of this
exactly.
interdependent,
I know, but
wholesome.
it's good to also say everything is in its glorious purified
Right.
form.
So all the sentient beings we were imagining around us at the beginning, they're now in our hands, and we're imagining them in completely purified form and completely happy. Sajipati Jokching Meto Tramri Rablingji Nidegyen Pali Sangye Jindu Bide Okum Dashinla And then you offer that vision into the hearts of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, as you say, Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Nirya Tayami, with the intention that we are going to help to work to make this happen. Okay. Now we go to we're now getting into the section of the text where Nagarjuna is seriously going to go into the topic of his expertise, which is emptiness. In our last session, I talked about the story of Helen Keller and her teacher, Anne Sullivan, and I used it as an analogy for our own path, the sort of the beginningless ego self-grasping ignorance that we all have, and in a way we don't actually realize what the nature of reality is. And it's similar to the way Helen Keller, blind and deaf, she had no idea what the world around her really was, and it took her teacher Anne Sullivan to be able to connect with her and communicate with her in such a way that Helen Keller finally had this direct realization, this direct understanding of how to put everything together and what the world meant and how she was connected to it. And it completely transformed her life, and she became such a positive force in the world at her time. So that serves as a really kind of illuminating analogy for the situation we currently find ourselves in, where we have this, the darkness of ego, self-grasping ignorance. And it's only through our teachers who understand how to communicate with us to try and get us to see the way reality is actually existing, so that we can have a direct realization of the nature of that reality, which will actually liberate us and free us from our own suffering, free us from the endless cycle of rebirth and death and rebirth, and enable us to go all the way to enlightenment, to be able to help all other sentient beings, the ones that we were holding in our hands. So now we start with, and I'm calling this particular session appearance and reality. There's a difference between the way things appear to us and the way things they actually are in reality. We assume that everything which appears to our the regular functioning awareness of our senses, we assume that that's accurate, that it's an accurate representation of reality. When we look out with our eyes, when we hear things with our ears, we make the assumption this is the way things are, because this is all we know. This is all we have known since we were little. So we think this is reality. We believe that the way we perceive things and the way we mentally apprehend these appearances is correct, and that we're unmistaken about it. That's what we believe. But according to the Buddha, we have, through our ignorance, unwittingly accepted an incomplete and mistaken view of the appearance of reality for actually being reality. So the view that we have is not complete. The view that we have is not including everything that actually is going on, but we think it is. And so we're mistaking this view that we have as actually being reality, when what it actually is a mistaken appearance that is not giving us the totality of what reality is. This is why the situation we're in is similar to the story I was talking about last week, which is why I told that story about Helen Keller and her teacher, because if we remember that story, we can think, oh yeah, it's like that. It's like the way she was. And her teacher came in and she sort of opened things up for us. That's what our teachers are doing for us in Buddhism. So this mistaken view that we have of the appearance of reality for actually being reality, it causes problems for us. As I said before, what we do is we cling to a kind of inherently, independently self-existence that we have, and by clinging to that as being as if we really are some kind of independent self-existent thing, and we also grasp at all of the objects of our awareness as if they are also independent self-existing things. So we when those things change, or when something blocks what we want, we get kind of bent out of shape. Say we're in a, we're in a relationship with somebody. It all seems great at the time. We enter into it. We think, isn't this wonderful? I finally have met this person. What a great friend and companion they are. And eventually, inevitably, something's going to occur where either you don't behave the way they think you should, or they don't behave the way you think they should. And it creates this tension. And this tension creates sort of a separation that occurs between the two, and a lack of communication. And we know that that can go all the way, if it's not dealt with properly, it can go all the way to a complete split up of whether it's a relationship, but we see this happening with political parties. You go to one side or the other, and all of a sudden you find out you're like hating people that you don't even know, because you've grasped onto this idea that the side that I am on is right, it is correct, and in reality, we're mistaken about all of this. We're mistaken about all of it. And this is what the Buddha is teaching us, and what our teachers, as emissaries of the Buddha, are teaching us. And we have to kind of maintain an open mind as we go through the Buddhist path, because it's going to bring up things for us, such as beginningless time, or reincarnation, or karma, that we can't. The only way we can prove it is to ourselves, and by proving it through logic. And as Brian and I were talking about when Brian arrived, he has a little book on logic, and we are sorely lacking in logic, in real logic that can cut through appearances. This is the Tibetan Buddhists excel in this. They have a whole system of debate and logic. Our teachers are incredibly logical, and hopefully some of that rubs off on us, and we can learn. So all of confusions and frustrations in our life causes us suffering, and the suffering is caused because we're grasping onto, holding on to something that actually doesn't even exist. And it's so we're going, what it is we're going against the nature of reality. Remember, I've talked about that the in and the out, and the constantly everything is shifting and changing, and moment to moment dependently arising. When we try to grab onto a moment and say, this will not change, this must stay this way, we are actually going against the nature of what reality is. And of course, this is going to cause problems that we label as suffering. Basically, the suffering is, reality is saying, no, you got to get back in line here. This is a mistake. So for all of us, when we come to Buddhism, usually it's because we've tried a lot of other things and nothing has made sense to us. And we're kind of coming to this saying, can I make any sense of why things don't seem right in life? And Buddhism, for some people, for some of us, gives an answer and a path and a solution that's workable.
I just wanted to amplify a little bit about why it is that our appearances, the appearance to our consciousness, I mean, I'm just going to state the obvious, but I'm doing this for myself and maybe somebody else will benefit from this brief analysis, but the appearances that we take into our consciousness, of course, are dependent on our physical sense faculties and mental faculty. So, each of those sense faculties has a limited range within which it can connect with its object. So, like my hand can't feel the air. The air is there, but my touch sense doesn't have the sensitivity to, let's just say, or, my eyes can't see ultraviolet, never mind, all the others. Say, as we know, same with our ears. We know simplistically our dogs can hear things we can't. And so on, and it goes like that for every sense. So we know analytically that every sense is limited, and so therefore what we're seeing is highly filtered. And on top of that, because we can't see, say, for example, the energetic movement in the atomic structure of things, because of the limitations of our eye, we see them as solid. And so even, so hour after hour, minute after minute, our senses keep feeding us this erroneous, this highly limited information that we are highly habituated to interpreting as this is the real world. And here it is. So that I just wanted to amplify an aspect of this of why we're so duped by appearances, why appearances are so, I mean, at the beginning, all you could do is use your intellectual power of analysis to refute the reality of how things appear to you. And this is what the monks, our own monks, have trained us to try to think of this way, is to repeatedly, often, every day, as often as you can, to remind yourself that the appearance to your consciousness is not how things actually exist.
Yeah, that's
And I mean, never mind
great
interdependence and all that, but I just
right.
felt a need to,
Right.
for myself, take a minute to think that through, because, I was feeling kind of uncomfortable. It's like, okay, well, let me think about this for a sec. Anyway.
That's good.
Thanks for
We've talked about this kind of thing before, and one of the things I think we have in our favor right now is the level of technology that exists. So how Kabir said, you can move your hand through the air and you don't feel the air. Well, we can move our hand also through the air and we don't feel the Wi-Fi. We don't see the Wi-Fi with our eyes at all. And yet, here we are. We're communicating with people via Wi-Fi. What it appears to be is, oh well, there's a computer there, and they're all on the screen. But there's stuff happening that we can't pick up with any of our senses in a meaningful way. And yet we know that it must be happening because we are able to communicate. So I can see that things like neuroscience, physics, the current level of technology is actually helping us with the idea that there's more than, quote, meets the eye. There's more than meets the senses as we have them. And we have examples that verify this for us. So it makes me personally have more faith and willingness to listen to what the Buddha is saying, what the Buddhist teachings are saying, what our teachers are saying, and going, this is possible. Why isn't this possible? When we talk about things like, they talk about things like various realms of existence, which we don't see. The only realm they talk about that we see is ours and the animal one. And it seems like the animals see ours as well. But there are all other kinds of realms that exist in, maybe you could say, different frequencies or different fields of energy that we're just not aware of, in the same way that we're not aware of the Wi-Fi frequencies going through the room, unless we're very, very sensitive, and some people are, and they feel it. So that's a really good point. and that's a really good point about how appearances are fooling us into thinking everything is solid. For instance, physics will say a solid thing like a table. Well, if you go down to the subatomic particles, just as you said, Kavita, it's all moving. It's all moving and changing constantly. So this helps us a lot with understanding that our appearances are not the appearance that appearances to our consciousness are not necessarily everything that's out there, and we should almost have the mind of a scientist in this respect. In a real sense, Buddhism and the Buddhist path is a science of the mind, the science of consciousness. I was saying to Brian before we started, it's really almost laughable to me that science, only in very rare cases now, and it's very, very new, but science in the past has not really taken into account consciousness, which is subjective. It's the scientist's consciousness is the thing that's observing everything and making decisions about how things exist, but not taking into account that the consciousness is an essential element of all of this. The consciousness is an essential element of the universe itself. Without consciousness, there would be no experience of a universe. There'd be no way to postulate that anything existed or didn't exist. Consciousness is essential, and it needs to be studied, and that's what Buddhism does, is study consciousness, because it is such an important element of what reality is. So that's what we're doing. So we go to the next stanza in Nagarjuna, which is stanza 26. Look how far we've come. And here's what it says. And this is Jeffrey Hopkins, bless his heart. He recently passed away, and he's the one who translated these stanzas that we're using. And I remember the monks always said, Geshe-drapa, Lama Pasang, every monk we've talked to about translations and translators always said, Jeffrey Hopkins is the best. He's the best. He speaks Tibetan the best. He understands all the nuances. He gets it down and translates this into English. It's so accurate, according to what the Tibetans understood. So this is Jeffrey Hopkins' translation of Nagarjuna's stanza 26. I am not. I will not be. I have not. I will not have. Those statements, that frightens all the childish and extinguishes fear in the wise. So when those of us who are still, here's the thing that triggers fear in what he says, the childish, and triggers and extinguishes fear in the wise. I am not. I will not be. I have not. I will not have. So what this is talking about is I and me and mine. Me and mine. Me and mine. Saying there is no I or me the way we think of it. And so there is no mine the way we think of it. And so now we're going to sort of get into Cancer Tekchog's and others' explanation of this. So without a prior study of Buddhism, when we first hear the Buddhist teachings that the I or me is empty of inherent existence, the I or me is empty of inherent existence, that seems like a strange and confusing idea to us. We can easily misunderstand that idea to mean that the conventionally existing self that we all seem to know and experience, that self doesn't exist. That it's nothing but an illusion. Many people coming to Buddhism initially go, oh, well, what the Buddha is saying, this is just all of illusion. That's not what the Buddha is saying. The Buddha is not saying that the self that we all are familiar with and that we use to communicate with one another, the Buddha is not saying that self is an illusion. at all. As Nagarjuna says in stanza 26, I am not, I will not be, I have not, I will not have. So when we hear that, we think that the I or me can't be found. We're being told that the I or me can't be found when searched for in the collection of physical and mental components that make up our body and mind. Just like Kavita was talking about, we have all of these components that through which we perceive the world around us and believe that the appearance is the way we see it. So the Buddha is saying when you search through all the components that make up your consciousness and your body and your form, you're not going to actually find in any of that an inherently existing I or me. So when we hear that, we make the mistake and think, like I said, the Buddha's saying the I or me is nothing illusion. In addition, and that's like saying, and that would be like saying, I don't exist, which for somebody who's new to Buddhism and they think I don't exist, that's kind of a weird and scary concept that I don't exist. So it doesn't make sense to people who are new to Buddhism. In addition to that, the Buddha also says that the body and mind, the body and consciousness that we think of as my body and my consciousness, that body and consciousness itself can't be found when you search through the collections of elements of form and consciousness that make up the being who we are. So you can't actually find an inherently existing body, and you can't find an inherently existing mind in all of this. If you go through the exercise, you'll go, well, where is it? Where is it? Where is my body? Where does it actually exist? Is it in the cells? Is it in the flesh? Is it in the bones? And you keep finding, you keep going and going and going. There is no place where you're going to find the body, and there's no place you're going to find the consciousness, the actual independently self-existing consciousness, independently self-existing body. So we also then think that the Buddha is saying that my body and my mind doesn't exist. So it's saying, I don't exist, I am not. My body doesn't exist, it is not. My mind doesn't exist, it is not. So it's as if the Buddha is saying nothing exists. That's what people think emptiness means, nothing exists. So we mistakenly think that the Buddha is teaching that I am not existing now and I never will exist. That I don't have a body and mind now and I never will have a body and mind. It seems as if the Buddha is saying everything is nothing more than a grand illusion. And as I've said before, you will hear many, many people just go, it's all an illusion. My mother used to say, it's all an illusion, as if somehow it doesn't matter. But it does matter because we experience suffering and pain and frustration. So that part's not an illusion. So we will then conclude that the Buddha's teaching means that after death, there's nothing. We won't exist anymore. It's like total lights out, total non-existence. And what happens is we can fall into the extreme of nihilism, which is a very, very downward spiral, which is difficult to get out of. It's like intense, bottomless pit depression type of nihilism. So if we have this kind of view, and we try to meditate on emptiness without the proper study and correct understanding of it, there is the real danger that we'll meditate incorrectly and come to the wrong conclusion about what emptiness is. We could fall to the extreme of nihilism, thinking that because karma and its effects and the effects of karma don't exist inherently, that they don't have any independent self-existence, that they don't really exist at all, and therefore they don't matter, that karma is just an illusion. And so nothing matters, and so I can do anything I want. If I get away with it, I can do it. So we become reckless in our actions, in our behavior, in our speech. We see it all the time. And we see that this reckless behavior only leads to ruination, really. That's ultimately where it goes. Some kind of really bad result. This is obvious. This is obvious. And so Buddhism is telling us, no, you cannot be reckless in your behavior. You can't be reckless in your, your speech and the way you think. You have to rein all of this in and get the correct view in everything you do. Which is why those initial practices the Buddhist gives, the 7-limb practice, is extremely important as a first step for us to do. Nagarjuna says in his treatise on the middle way that through a misperception of emptiness, a person of little intelligence is destroyed. In a similar way to a person who is, he says, a person who is trying to extract the venom from a poisonous snake. There's a particular way you have to hold the snake sort of by the jaws or something, and then you can get the venom out, and you can use that venom to make antibodies and stuff for, a serum, an anti-venom. Nagarjuna says, if you don't know how to hold that snake properly, the snake itself will bite you, and you will become poisoned like it, by it. And so he's saying this is what having a wrong view of emptiness is like. And if we try to meditate with that wrong view will bite us, and poison us. We'll get the complete wrong idea of what emptiness is, what the Buddha is talking about. So we have to be very, very clear if we don't want to basically poison ourselves with our thoughts and our meditations. We have to be extremely clear about what the Buddha is saying when the Buddha is talking about emptiness and talking about dependent arising. However, for those who are wise and correctly understand the ultimate nature of existence, the way the Buddha teaches it, meditating on emptiness is liberating, and it ends all of the fear and suffering of cyclic existence for those who meditate in the proper way. If a person, the I, now here's something, when Buddhism says person, talks about the person, it is synonymous with when we say I or when we say me. We have to make a distinction between I and me and the person and what we term as the possessions of that I and me and the person, such as my eyes, my nose, my ear, my body, my mind, my this, my that. All the things that we think is me, if we look at the way we think and look at the way we term things, we'll say I, basically I feel, I think. But I think with my mind, as if the mind itself is not the I. I feel with my, sense of touch or my emotions, but we always say my emotions as if the I or the me owns those things. So the I or the me is none of that. The I or the me it's none of that, none of the body, none of the emotions, none of those things that the I says is mine. So what the I and me and person actually is simply an idea. It's a sense. It's just a sense that there is an I-ness, there is a me-ness, there's an existence that is a complete independent self-existence. It has nothing to do with the body, with the consciousness, with all of the things that the I says is mine. The I will even say my consciousness. So the I is just it's almost like a phantom idea. A phantom idea, the I and the me. And we have to think of it, start to think of it that way, to look at it that way, and start postulating things by looking at it that way. That has nothing to do with all of the aggregations of components that make up what we call our body and our consciousness and our mind and all of this thing. The I and me is like a phantom idea that is very, very, very strong in us when it's put to the test. If we are really harshly criticized by someone, we'll see all of a sudden that I, me, arises like some kind of monster. It's this idea we have. Also, when we go into, sink into a deep depression, it's all about me. It's all about me. If it would be impossible to fall into a state of depression if we were centered on others. If we were not self-centered, if we were centered on others, we just wouldn't fall, we couldn't become depressed. Depression is a closing in on oneself and a sort of a turning of one's own disappointment and anger towards oneself. So it's a very, very self-centered kind of way of being, which is ultimate ego type stuff. And that's really important to recognize, because this is how we can pull ourselves out of depression, is to sort of go, hold on a minute, I need to shift where I'm centering my attention. I'm centering it all on me. I need to start looking out, looking out at other beings and centering my attention on them and what are their needs, like that. That will help a great deal. But we do need help to get ourselves out of a situation like that, like really severe depression. Okay. So if the person, the I, this idea, truly has an inherent independent self-existence, the way it seems to appear to us, then that person, that I, that me, has to be findable in either the mental and physical aggregates that form the basis upon which we designate that person, or that person, the I, has to be totally separate from them. Completely, so that this idea of I or me is somewhere completely apart from all of the things the I or me says is mine.
I still can't get this one, honestly. Why can't the I or me just be the whole lot, the whole batch?
It depends on how you label it. If you want to label, well, yeah, I mean, there is basically Buddhism comes down to saying the I and the me does exist. But it exists, if you go back to this mantra of Manjushri, the na means the empty nature of self and phenomena. The names that we give to empty nature of self and phenomena, I and me, that's a name we're giving, are mere labels. They're nothing but names. The empty nature behind those mere labels cannot be gained and it can't be lost. So the I and the me do exist as mere labels for this whole collection. But this is how we have to see it. We don't see it that way. We see that the I or me is like this inherently existing meanness that is the one that's doing all the grasping and all the anger and all the fighting and all this whatever. This is what drives the problem. Is this thinking of the I or me as if it were an independent self-existent thing, rather than just a name, a label for the collection of all the interdependent, constantly shifting parts and pieces that make up the being.
One thing that helps me when I'm stuck on that, basically to your point of like, why is it if in meditation, I'll think about like, okay, if I chop off my hand, am I still me? If I chop off my leg, am I still me? If I chop off both legs, am I still me? Like, and I do this, and then and kind of when you get to the head, it gets a little tricky because then you're like, no, because we're so attached to this idea that it's we're
Somehow
sort of in our brain.
in there, right.
Yeah, but I guess the point, and then or try to go the other way where you're like, okay, here's a foot, is that me? Here's another me. And then
Right.
at a certain point, you can sort of catch yourself going, that's me. Like I'm labeling it now. Like it's when it's all, and you can kind of catch that, and it's a different point.
Oh, so explain more clearly what you just said. That's me. I'm labeling it now. What are you labeling?
Well, like I said, maybe go the other way where you think, okay, here's a foot, my foot, quote unquote. We'll put the my in quotes, but here's another one. Here's a leg. Here, and you're doing this with your own body, and it's like, at what point there seems to be when I do that, there seems to be a moment
Yeah,
where my brain goes, okay, that collection is me.
okay,
Right, right, and that's, and it's
Or-
like a label.
Like an axle, a wheel, a so and so, all of a sudden, now it's a car.
Right.
Right, like there's a moment, and it's hard to catch where that
Right.
moment is,
Right.
but it. And I don't know where I'm going with that, but
No, perfect.
there is a sense that, okay,
It's
there
perfect.
is a labeling process going on,
It's
that's all I
perfect.
can.
You know, I
kind of
forgot,
get a sense.
I should mention that because
Right, it's a good start, maybe.
Right. You know, that's a perfect analogy, the car, that works really well, because we're not thinking of it as me, you know?
Yeah,
So the car, we understand that the car is made up of many parts. You know, the engine, the wheels, the axis, the finish, the windows, all of the stuff. It makes up, you know, the car. And if we go to analyze that car, just like you said, Brian, well, the car isn't the hood of the car. The car isn't the wheels, the car isn't the axle, the car is not the engine. But when that whole collection is sort of put together, we need to label it as something. And it doesn't become the car until we actually label car onto that. But all car is a label. You know, you cannot say that the car is any one of those parts. And it's the same with me and I. Yeah.
and that's, the illustration. One of my teachers always, oh, I don't have one, but a pen.
Yeah.
And he'd say, what is this? You know, I'll go, oh, it's a pen. And it's like, okay, well, for the puppy dog, if I hold this out,
Right.
what is it to the puppy dog? Well, it's a chew toy.
It's a
right. So who's right?
Right.
What label is right? And then you get, and of course, it's like, well, they're both right, because they're both labeled, because they function
Mhm.
as a chew toy
Right.
or as a, you know, and if you're like, well, it doesn't exist, then it's an illusion. Okay, well then fine, come here, I'm gonna write, you get your mustache,
Right.
you know, this is what
Right.
you do. He's like, no, it functions, so it's not
It's not another-
non-existent, it's not nihilistically not there. But what is it, a pen or a chew toy or da. And then you get really deep where it's like, yeah, but is it even a color, even a shape? Like you can go deep into it, but that's the start, is just recognizing that there's this process of labeling it
Right.
as a pen,
And
and
that-
that dog might label it something different.
That's
because it's
such
a
an
different
important point.
consciousness.
Yeah. That is such an important point. And this is why we need, it's like that whole process, what you're talking about, that's a kind of a meditation. That's
Yes.
we're analyzing how we actually go about labeling things. And what the labels do, just like you said, they allow us to communicate with one another and function. And because we understand a label stands for, conventionally speaking,
Right.
a certain kind of thing. You know, like for you know, humans, we label this pillow. And we know what the function is, what we're supposed to do with it. It makes it soft and all this kind of thing. For, you know, I don't know, some kind of microscopic organism, you know, this would be labeled home.
Right.
You know, but who's wrong? You know, who's wrong? It really depends on what we all conventionally agree. So like your example of the pen being either a utensil for writing or a play toy for a dog. Well, we conventionally go, all right, well, yeah, Fido, you can use that as a toy, no problem. And we can shift, we can change the labels. And as long as we all agree and we're not upset by it, you know, and don't fight over, no, that's my prize pen, don't allow that to happen, it's a pen. As long as we go, big deal, it's a pen, let the dog play with it.
Well, that's
Conventionally
key, because which is that in addition to when our minds, wherever in that process of putting and I think it's actually Chandrakirti uses the example of a chariot, basically
Yeah.
as a car, like, but wherever it is in that process that we project that label, we also have emotion comes with that. The attachment comes with that, right? Like that's where, and that's why you say when you're like, oh, that's my favorite pen, don't chew that. That's part of the problem.
That's the problem.
And I can't remember who was explaining to me, but they were saying how they said, and I don't know, they had traveled to northern India, and we're with a lot of Tibetans, and they were saying they were so impressed at how, like a car, something would break down, and they would use a shoelace or some, or what random things to fix things. And he was just thinking out loud. He's like, I wondered. It made me think, like, I would never have thought to use that to do that. And he's like, I wonder if it's because they're more flexible in their labels of what things can do and be. And I was like, oh, that's kind of
Right,
cute,
right,
but kind of profound observation.
Yeah.
That, like you said, you don't have to get angry.
right.
that
We can
Yeah.
be, you know, we can be
Yeah.
personally, we can be flexible in our labels.
Yeah.
Where the problem comes in is when you're within a conventional kind of society and certain labels, you go past what everybody accepts, and then it's a problem. So we have to be aware of that.
Sure.
And we have to also be aware that, for instance, I don't care a lot about cars. What I care about is that the cars function.
Right.
They can get from one place to the other, but in terms of nicks and dents and scratches and blah, 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 I don't care. There are many people who care a lot about that. You know, I care a lot about other things, but it's just not the car. But there are many people, so you're talking about this, something happens when we label something. You know, the collection of things come together, and then we label it a particular thing, and then our what Kavita was saying, the basic different kinds of sense consciousnesses that we have become kind of really attached to that idea of what that thing is and the particular label we give it. And if anything goes wrong with that label, whether it's the car or it's the relationship or it's the, you know, whatever it is, we get all bent out of shape because we have such a strong attachment to it being a certain way, being that way all the time, never changing. My car has to be sparkling, clean, shiny all the time. And if anybody even touches it, you know, it's going to arouse some kind of aversion in me. And this is our problem. We even with our labels, well, we do it with our labels. That's how we do it. With our labels, we concretize the thing. So again, the car, you have just a bunch of parts, they all work together, they're all functioning together, but we then label all of that as car. And then we put onto car some kind of independent self-existence as if it was encapsulated in a bubble car, you know? And if we're very attached to that particular car, the Porsche, oh, God, it's my Porsche and it's silver, or Jaguar, and it's just beautiful. Anything goes wrong with that thing, we get completely, I mean, we lose it. I've seen it happen. People lose it over the label that they have concretized and become so attached to that it causes, it's the thing that causes all this frustration and anger. And it's also causing all of the attachment and the grasping. You know, we concretize something when we label it. So we have to realize that these labels are mere labels. They're nothing more than labels. They are not actually the concrete, independently self-existing thing that we're making it out to be. And this is amazingly liberating if we can actually allow ourselves to begin to loosen up, like Merritt was saying, it's almost as if we have to like loosen up our mind about things. If we loosen up the stranglehold we have on certain concepts and ideas and labels of how something should be, then we're able to look at things as they change and transform with a much more open mind, and not such a judgmental mind, not the kind of mind that's going to lash out and attack and try and stop things, but figure out how can this work now? Same like with the chew toy, the pen. You know, all right, big deal, it's a pen. Most of us aren't attached to the pens unless it's a very, very special pen, you know, and then it's a big deal. But if we can get over that, if we can see that they're mere labels, then we won't get as upset about things personally, and we may be able to help in the situation where other people are getting upset. You know, we could find ways to be of benefit. So this is it's really big, and it takes a lot of analysis. And ultimately, until we have the direct realization that things don't exist inherently at all, we still have to work on it. We still have to keep analyzing and working on it. And working with ourselves, with our own
Yeah,
mind.
when Geshe Nima was here, I remember, he would say this frequently, that like. The Brian that just walked in and the Brian that sat down are not the same, and I don't know, that stuck with me, and recently I've been looking at old pictures of myself as a kid.
Right.
And just. As a form of meditation and trying to go like, okay, is that me? What does that mean? What does me mean? I mean, obviously, clearly, it's all my cells have changed since then, and so why do I feel a connection? Why, yeah, I don't know, and I don't quite really know the proper way to analytically ask that question, but I don't know, a bunch of my old photos have popped up.
I think we get.
At them and going,
Yeah, I know exactly what, I think everybody knows what you're talking about.
yeah,
And like the person that we were even yesterday isn't the same
Right.
person that we are today, the same I mean, things have changed, everything changes, and so. The thing is that what we do, we have that label, you were labeled Brian, and you have the label of your mom and your dad and your siblings and all of that, and we become attached. To that, attached or that we also have aversion because attachment wasn't met the way we wanted it to be met in our families. So we have a very strong attachment or aversion when it comes to our families and in our history. And so it's very difficult for us to let go of the idea that I am no longer that person. My parents, if they're still alive, are no longer the people they were when I was 3 or 4. They have changed. Everything has changed. My brothers and sisters have all changed. Let us look at it that way.
and yet there is some kind of
There's a
continuity.
right. There's a continuum.
A continuum, that's a better
There's a
word.
continuum
That's a better
of
word.
conscious awareness that keeps moving through and growing and changing.
Yeah.
So it's a lot. It's a lot to, analyze and think about, but it can be liberating if we can see things as mere labels.
I just wanna say, it is what will be liberating.
Well, it will
Yeah,
be,
that's a good
but it
I
can't,
mean-
but we have to do it.
Yeah, I'm just saying, quit with the qualifiers, not that it can be liberating, it's the nut of what will ultimately be our liberation.
Here's what I'm saying then. It won't liberate us until we actually have the realization of
Yeah,
it.
directly.
And keep analyzing.
Okay, while the camera's pointed to me, and I wanna circle back to the 7 limb prayer real briefly. Because especially this will be relevant to some of the folks in the Zoom today. The words in the 7 limb practice are each of the lines, and I'm gonna say this, in my opinion, should be taken as a jumping off point for analytical meditation. So each line says something that you are meant to analyze, contemplate, and come to your own conclusion about why this line is so. And so please know, especially if you're relatively new to the study and practice, please know that nothing in this lineage would say, do this by rote and it will have a magical effect. Our lineage is based on analysis, contemplation, meditation, and then you have your own aha moment of why this or that is so. So applying that to the 7 limb practice, each of those lines are a jumping off point for a point of analysis that is only going to transform you and have all this purifying effect that Christopher mentions. That only will be the case if you intellectually analyze it and come to a conclusion of why it's there, why is it so, in relation to the context of the 7 limb practice is, in a sense, kind of celebrating the fact that this is a path under the guidance of qualified teachers. And so the whole point is you're reciting these 7 ideas, confirming to the qualified teachers who you are depending on to keep revealing what you need to have revealed to you to continue on the path. So always take always take that in mind when you're studying and practicing, that nothing is by rote. Everything is meant to be understood, internalized, contemplated, and ultimately, okay, that's why this line is here. Okay, that's why this line is here. It's not some magic secret potion formula.
Kavita's absolutely right. Absolutely. Everything she said is completely correct. Initially, when we're learning these practices, we have to rely on somebody to tell us what the points are and the steps are. And as we become, for instance, say it's like in this guided audio that I made of the 7-limb practice. The point is not to just sit there every day for the rest of your life and listen to the audio. The point is to become very familiar with all the steps, all the things that you're imagining, and all the practices like the Vajrasattva purification practice. Become very familiar with yourself with all of it. Get off the audio, like getting rid of your training wheels on the bicycle, and then you do this yourself. And what happens is the thing begins to blossom in your own mind, and you begin to realize the truth of these things and how the meaning that they actually have for you. So yeah, Kavita is absolutely right about that. Nothing works with rote, none of it, because rote after a while just becomes like saying a magic formula. Same with the prayers. If you just say the prayers by rote, it's maybe there's some benefit there, but it's not the transformative benefit that will occur if you actually understand personally what those prayers mean to you. Then it has the transforming effect, which is what we're looking for. Yeah. Okay. Okay, when we investigate the way that we're not able to find a person, or say the example of the car, we're actually not able to find a person or a car that exists from its own side. It's all just a label for all the parts, the components. A person that exists completely independent of everything else, that doesn't exist. When we understand this, we conclude that the person therefore must be empty of inherently independent self-existence. And then what we do, Kensur Tekso says, what we do then is focus our mind on this emptiness. He says in his commentary that we don't think I am meditating on emptiness. We don't think that I am meditating on emptiness. What we do is we just focus on the absence of an inherently existing person, or the absence of an inherently existing car, if you want to use the car example. You focus that actually there is no inherently existing car at all. And just like that, there is no inherently existing I or me at all. It's all a label put onto the collection of parts, just like the car. So now we're going to talk about two types of cognition, and I've talked about this before. During the meditative equipoise on emptiness, and this is when we have what they call it shamatha or calm abiding. Kavita talked about this last week, where your mind is your concentration is completely focused on the object. And in this case, what we're talking about, the object being the emptiness of inherent existence, the absence of any kind of inherent independent self-existence. So when we achieve that state of calm abiding and special insight, what they call, the mind no longer apprehends the person or I as truly existing, as truly having some independent self-existence of its own. The mind that is able to apprehend the conventionally existing I, the mind that we all are quite aware of and use all the time. We conventionally go, oh yeah, there's Brian, there's Kavita, there's Christopher, there's Claudia. We understand all of that. This is the way we work. We know this, and this is how things function. That particular kind of mind doesn't function at all during this kind of meditative absorption or meditative concentration. It's like it's shut off. It's separate. It's away. And you just have a mind that is totally concentrated on this single pointed, calm abiding that's united with this special insight that is recognizing the lack of any independent, self-existent nature of the I or the me, or whatever it is you're meditating on, analyzing. So so the idea is these two cognitions don't exist together now in the state that we're in. So what they say when somebody arises from this meditation on emptiness, and they've had this single-pointed concentration, calm abiding, special insight, that when they arise from that, that cognition goes away, and it's then replaced by the one that we normally have, where we look out and we see all these things, and it's a conventional existence. But what occurs is we don't forget. We don't forget what we had realized in that meditative absorption, and we begin to see the conventional existence in a different way than we normally have. We stop seeing the labels as being these inherently concrete existing things that we can get so attached to or so repelled by. We see it completely differently. And these two cognitions finally come together when it doesn't occur after we're liberated from cyclic existence. What will liberate us from the suffering of cyclic existence is a direct realization of emptiness. But still, there's more work to do. In order to go on to the enlightenment of a Buddha, we have to keep developing our, what we would call awakened heart and mind, our bodhicitta. We have to develop great compassion. We don't let go of that compassion simply because we are freed from our own suffering and we're out of this cyclic existence. We keep on with this working with this great compassion. And through that great compassion, we have the motivation and the perseverance and the energy to overcome our cognitive obscurations. The cognitive obscurations that block us from having omniscience, the omniscience of enlightenment. And these cognitive obscurations are like these little things that muddy, the little polluted things that muddy the water, that there's still, the water isn't completely clean, and we have to get all of the particles that are foreign to that water, the pure consciousness, we have to get those out. And those are getting rid of the cognitive obscurations. When that occurs, then we achieve omniscience, and that's enlightenment, the omniscience of enlightenment. And at that point, those two different cognitions, the conventional one and the one that exists when you're in meditative absorption, they come together and join. So that a person who has reached enlightenment and who has omniscience, who is a Buddha, not only sees everything conventionally, and but it also appears to them as it is, as being empty of any kind of inherent existence. The two function at the same time together. This is something we currently can't even comprehend or understand. But that's what we're working towards. When people are uneducated and lack understanding in regard to emptiness, and they hear that the I and mind don't exist objectively from their own side, they misunderstand and think that the person or the I who experiences pleasure doesn't exist, and that the possessions and people that give them pleasure don't exist either. And this idea is very confusing to people who have not studied Buddhism, and it makes them uncomfortable, or could even cause fear. And this is interesting. Even the followers of the lower philosophical schools of Buddhist tenets, we've talked about this in the past. With Shantideva, we talked about the tenet systems. And it's a series of philosophical systems that keep getting more and more refined as they go to the ultimate refined system, which is called the Prasangika Madhyamaka system. But these lower schools, which are, they're just the names, the Vaibhashikas, Sautrantikas, Chittamatrins, and the Svatantrikas, they think that if the person does not exist inherently in some way, in other words, if the person doesn't have an independent self-existence in some way, then the person who creates karma and the one who experiences its positive or negative results must be non-existent. They all think this way except for the Prasangikas. They all think this way in some form or another. It's not exactly the same form, but they all come to some conclusion that there is something that actually exists independently, has an independent self-existence. And the Prasangikas say, no, there isn't. It's merely a label, as we've been talking about. There is nothing actually with an independent self-existence. So as a result, the proponents of these lower schools also will fall to the extreme of nihilism, and they'll become afraid of that idea. And what Kensor Tekchog is saying is that none of them are meditating on the correct meaning of emptiness. Even these other schools of Buddhism, philosophy, they are not meditating on the actual correct meaning, which Nagarjuna is shining a light on. However, those who do understand the meaning of emptiness in the stages of the path don't become afraid, because they know that while things don't inherently exist, they do exist dependently and interdependently. They know that emptiness doesn't mean total non-existence. Emptiness means that things exist nominally by means of naming and labeling, rather than being independently self-existent. This extinguishes their fear, because they know they have entered the path that will free them from the fear and suffering of cyclic existence and lead them to liberation. Okay, here is stanza 27. By him who speaks only to help beings, that's the Buddha, by him who speaks only to help beings, it was said that all beings have arisen from the conception of I and are enveloped with the conception of mine. Ordinary beings have a kind of a fear of emptiness because they can't distinguish between the conventionally existent I that functions and that we all know about, and the inherently existing I. They can't distinguish between that. The conventional I is the object of a reliable cognition, and the inherent I, or independently self-existent I, is the object of I grasping, the ego's self-grasping. There's a Tibetan word that they use for this, and it's called zin, and it can be translated as either apprehend or grasp, but depending on the context in which it's used. This word has a double meaning, and the double meaning indicates the two ways of cognizing a person. With the first way, we apprehend a conventionally existing person. This occurs without any kind of special emotion, and we'll say, I'm sitting, I'm thinking, I'm driving, I'm talking. You know, we don't think about it. That kind of I exists, and the awareness that apprehends it is valid because it correctly identifies a person. This person is the one who creates karma, is reborn, and attains liberation and enlightenment. With the second way of cognizing a person, we reify the I as if it had a concrete material existence. It's like reifying the car. We grasp it as being an inherent, independently self-existing I. That kind of I doesn't exist at all because nothing exists inherently or independently. The I-grasping mind that grasps it is a mistaken and erroneous awareness. This goes back to Om, and which is the beginningless, they say it's the sound, beginningless sound or frequency of the universe itself, the Aum, and that constant in and out, never staying the same, constantly changing, constantly moving, going into sort of universes implode and then they explode. It's just like our breath. So we see reality we see it in every aspect of reality. We see it in ourselves, in our breath. You know, this dependently arising nature is constantly there. Now there are two types of grasping, self-grasping, and we talked about this before, so I won't deal too much with it. It's the self-grasping of persons and the self-grasping of phenomena. And the self-grasping of persons is what we've been saying. The person is this sense. It's just like a phantom idea of me and mine. And as we said, it's really nowhere to be found. So then the the self-grasping of phenomena is very similar to what we were saying about the car. The car is not a person. The car is not, you know, a me or mine, like we think of me or mine. But the car, we see that the thing that we label, that mere label car, we see that as being the self of what the car is, as if the car, so that we'll say the car has a hood, the car has wheels, the car has axles, the car has an engine. Just like we'll say, I have eyes, I have ears, I have nose, I have consciousness. It's the same thing. So there's a self of persons, and then there's a self of phenomena, and that's how those two kinds of self are, and we grasp at those.
Nice car.
Right. Or, you know, ugly piece of shit, right? And you know, and we do that with people too. We do that. You can see how we do this and the problems that it causes. So the being, the Buddha, who speaks only to help us, is saying that all of us, all beings, arise from I grasping. We all arise from this primordial ignorance. When we talked about beginningless time and beginningless ignorance, we went over this a lot. We all arise from this. And Chandrakirti, who Brian mentioned, he's a 7th century Buddhist scholar of the Madhyamaka Prasangika school. He explains what the Buddha meant by this. And he says, ordinary beings first think, I. And through that thought, they generate the view of a personal identity that grasps at I. Then they generate the view of a personal identity that grasps mine by thinking my body, my eyes, my thoughts, and so on, referring to the person who is the quote owner of these things. But again, that I or me, I like the idea of a phantom idea. It's just an idea. So now we get into the 5 aggregates, and Kavita was talking about this too, and this is, I think we're just about done, so we'll just probably end with this. Everything that we think of as I is a function of the components that come together to make up an individual. The Buddha calls these components the 5 skandhas, and in English they're called the 5 aggregates. The component parts of the aggregates work together so seamlessly that they create the sense of a single self or an I. However, the Buddha taught that there is no self or I occupying the aggregates. If we understand the aggregates, it will help us to see through the illusory appearance of the self. So we have aggregates of, you know, form, feeling, discrimination, conditioning, which are and consciousness, and all of these aggregations of form and consciousness sort of collect together in a the way there's a great Buddhist teacher. Her name is Barbara O'Brien, and she puts it. They gather together in an artificial way to create the illusion of an independently self-existing person, I, me. But it's all of these parts, like the parts of a car, all of these parts that we have are working together. And what they sort of generate for us is this idea of I. And we need to, if we understand each of these aggregates more clearly, we'll understand how they are working, and that there is no I in any of those. They're just creating the sort of an illusion of an I, like a, what would it be like? Virtual reality, a virtual reality kind of machine that all of a sudden you think, wow, I am this, I'm in this, I exist. And that's kind of how the 5 aggregates work to form the idea of an individual. So, because of this beginningless innate grasping at I and mine, we sentient beings create polluted karma that causes rebirth in cyclic existence. In this way, the sense of a person arises due to the view of a personal identity that keeps grasping at I and mine. And they say that's what brings us back into another rebirth in cyclic existence. We just keep grasping at me. There are 2 levels of grasping, innate and acquired. Tipta Chandra says, innate grasping has existed beginninglessly in the mind streams of ordinary beings and automatically goes from one life to the next. Acquired grasping is learned through contact with incorrect philosophies and psychological theories. She says acquired grasping is easier to eliminate on the path. The innate grasping is much more difficult to uproot. And that's what we are uprooting when we are analyzing and studying emptiness and then meditating on emptiness and finally having a direct realization of emptiness. We are uprooting that innate grasping at an I and mind. So the I grasping is not only the source of beings taking rebirth in cyclic existence, but it also keeps us trapped in cyclic existence by making us fear emptiness. We're afraid of this idea. We're afraid of losing I and me. We're afraid we'll be nothing without I or me. So to
Time's
benefit,
Time's up.
I know. So this is the last sentence. To benefit all beings and free them from cyclic existence, the Buddha taught the meaning of emptiness, which is what we go into next. The ultimate meaning of emptiness is what Nagarjuna then goes into. So we'll say our closing prayers. Anything else before we do? Okay. Final dedication, we'll do the same as we always do. We'll do the dedication, two dedication prayers, one about bodhicitta, one about emptiness, and then the final dedication of not being separated from our lamas. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. May the view of emptiness, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. And then the final dedication. In all my lives, may I not be separated from true lamas, and so enjoy the splendor of Dharma. Fully perfecting the virtues of levels and paths, may I speedily attain the state of Vajradhara, which is the primordial Buddha that we all have the potential to become. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher.
It is a quiet day today. Okay, see you guys. See you, Arthur. See you, Claudia.
Later, guys. Take it easy.
Okay.
Thanks for everything.
Oh, you're so welcome.